We'd like to welcome you, those of you joining us by way of Facebook and YouTube. We're glad to have you with us today. It's Father's Day, June 21st, 2020, and we're at the pulpit of Anchor Baptist Church. Take your Bibles and turn to 2 Timothy chapter 2. Here at Anchor, we've already read verses 6 down to the end of the chapter. We hope that you'll push the pause button, read that scripture, and then come back and join us for the rest of this message entitled, Living and Dying with No Regrets. We're live now, and I won't look back at the camera again. I'm preaching to you folks who are here this morning. But that is the title of our message, Living and Dying with No Regrets. There was an Austrian prolific composer named Franz Schubert. Now, most of us have probably never heard his name. He died when he was just 31 years old. A few years before his death, he started his 8th symphony. That's right, he'd already written 7. He had started his 8th symphony, had written about 2/3 of it, and then just put it on pause, gave the sheet music to a friend of his, and then, before he was ever able to finish the music, Franz Schubert died. Over in Europe, while we were fighting the Civil War, that sheet music made its way to the Vienna Music Association and was given its first public performance. Now, Schubert was already dead, and it came to be known as the Unfinished Symphony. And it's famous for that title because, obviously, Franz Schubert never finished it. He died when he was just 31. I got to thinking after I read that story, most artists, if not all artists, leave unfinished work. Did a little Googling this week. I don't know what we did before Google. I don't know how I ever found out this kind of useless information, but I Googled this week, unfinished works of art. Leonardo da Vinci, maybe you've heard of him. He was working on what would have been a masterpiece, and he left it unfinished. It's called Jerome in the Wilderness. If you ever studied a $1 bill, the front, the obverse of a $1 bill has a famous picture of George Washington. That famous picture of George Washington that's on the front of that $1 bill is actually a famous piece of art. And the famous piece of art, which was commissioned by a guy named Gilbert Stuart, is actually unfinished. The very bottom, and particularly the bottom, what's the bottom right of the artwork, is just, it's blank canvas, it's unfinished. A famous statue by Michelangelo, David, is unfinished. Mark Twain left behind an unfinished work called The Mysterious Stranger, and it could go on and on and on. Authors leave books unfinished. Musicians, artists, sculptors, inventors. Why, even preachers leave sermons unfinished. But you know, when it comes to a Christian's life work, a Christian doesn't have to leave his life work unfinished. Now, we've read from 2 Timothy 4, verse 6 down to the end of the chapter, which is Paul's last words. The very last thing that God used inspiration to give us from the Apostle Paul here, his last words. And we're going to focus on verse 7 that says, I have fought a good fight, I have finished my course, I have kept the faith. Each one of those 3 words, those 3 phrases, are actually intensive, perfect verbs. Now, I'm not a grammarian, don't want to become a grammarian, and I don't want to put you to sleep with grammar. But here's the point. Each one of those 3 phrases in verse 7 means that there is a completed action that has continuing results. Let me say that one more time. A completed action that has continuing results. Paul finished. He fought and finished. He raced a race course and finished. And when it came to keeping the faith, he finished. And every one of those concepts, it wasn't just I'm finished, I'm done, but it was I'm finished, I'm done. And as a result of that, there are things that are going to continue to happen into the future. You read this, there's no sense of regret. There's no sense of unfulfillment. Let me mention one more artist. Maybe you've heard of a guy named Mozart. When Mozart died, he was feverishly trying to finish what has come to be known as his Requiem in D minor, all right? Big deal, right? He was feverishly trying to finish it because he knew he was dying. And today, most folks who study history and can look at what he was doing and the symptoms that he had believe that it was his feverish pace to finish his music that caused him to die when he did. He didn't want to leave it left unfinished. He died trying to finish it. You don't sense that at all with Paul. Not at all. And so he was living and dying with no regrets. He knew that he wasn't going to be let back out. He knew that he was going to face sentence in front of Nero. He knew that was coming. God had given him a peace. And so he's lived and he's dying with no regrets. Wouldn't you like to live with no regrets? More importantly, looking forward, wouldn't it be eternally important to die with no regrets? Here's what we can look at from verse 7. I want you to see first. Everyone can fight a good fight. Everyone can fight a good fight. He says in verse 7, I have fought a good fight. That's not a specific fight, that's a generic fight, and that tells me that anyone can fight a good fight. The emphasis is on fighting, not on winning. He has fought a good fight, and you can too. Now, because two of these three phrases in this verse are athletic, I've got some sports stories to tell. Now, ladies, I hope that you'll forgive me ahead of time. I know that some of you don't care much about sports. I hope you'll forgive me, but Paul uses two out of his three metaphors here are athletic metaphors, and so they just kind of work with sports. And this first metaphor, he says, I fought a good fight. It's not hard to see that that's a boxing metaphor. Back in the 1988 Olympics, they took place in Seoul. There was a light middleweight American boxer named Roy Jones Jr. Now this is kind of an interesting story to me because I actually met Roy Jones Jr. Back in the late 80s when I was working on my graduate degree at Pensacola Christian College. One of the jobs that I had was I was teaching 7th and 9th grade history. We had an African American girl in our class, and her boyfriend was Roy Jones Jr., and she actually brought him to class one day, and he actually sat in my American government class one day with his girlfriend. So yes, I actually met Roy Jones Jr. once upon a time. Well, in 1988, he boxed in the Olympics in South Korea, all right? Blew through his early rounds. Everyone thought he was not just the favorite to win in his division, but that he was the best boxer in Seoul. Gold medal fight was actually against a South Korean. Now remember, they're in South Korea. The South Korean's name was Park Si-hoon. After the third round was over, it was a split decision, and Roy Jones Jr. lost. When there's a famous picture of this that you can Google, and you can just see the bewilderment on Jones's face, and you can see the shame on the Korean's face because he knew that he'd been beat. Jones would later say that as the referee was raising Park's hand in victory, he said to Jones, I can't believe they're doing this to you. After the fight was over out in the hallway, Jones came to Park and asked him if he'd won, if he thought he'd won. And through an interpreter, he just hung his head and says, no. With that response, Jones would later say, I'm cool with that. He knows I beat him. There's nothing else that can be done. That's fine. Interesting point, and I think it was the first time in some 60 years that at the Olympics, there's an award given called the Val Barker Cup. The Val Barker Cup is given to the best boxer at the Olympics. You have to understand that in boxing, it's not just one division. There are several divisions because the lightweight guys don't face the heavyweight guys. And so based on how much you weigh is based on what division you fight in. And so at the Olympics, not only do they medal in each of these weight divisions, they also give a cup to what they believe was the best boxer. Typically that would go to one of the gold medal winners, right? That year it went to Roy Jones Jr. Best boxing cup, best boxer winner, but didn't win the gold medal. You see, when it comes to a split decision, boxer doesn't have any control over those kinds of forces. It's the judges. It's the judges. It's not his job to win. It's his job to fight and then so to speak, let the chips fall where they may. We're not competing against others in Christianity. We're only competing against ourselves. We simply have to fight a good fight. Now, I want you to look at this and I want you to see that there's the recognition that this is a struggle. This is a struggle. The word fight, that's used twice. I have fought a good fight. Both times the word that's used comes from the Greek word agonizomai. It doesn't take a linguist to hear the word agony in that. In the first century, this was the term for boxing, to agonizomai. But it wasn't only used to refer to boxing, it was also the word that we would use to describe agony. And today, don't we all understand the concept of agony? I was going to, because of time I won't, but I was going to have us turn to 2 Corinthians 11. I was going to read the passage about some of the things that Paul had been through when he was stoned and left for dead, the times that he'd been beaten, the times that he'd been whipped, the times that he'd been out in the Mediterranean Sea and floating because the ship sank, all the times of difficulty. Sometimes we get a romantic notion of the Apostle Paul because of the superhero status that we've accorded him, but let me tell you something. He had a harsh life. And I'm not talking about before his conversion, I'm talking about after the fact. There were parts and parcels of long stretches of his life that we would use the word agony to describe. Now, how about you? Maybe a doctor has caused you to go through agony. Not because he's been a bad doctor, but because he's given you a bad prognosis. Maybe a boss has caused you some agony. Co-workers, spouse, or a child. I want you to understand that when you come to know the Lord as Savior, that is not the prescription for a life of ease. There is a recognition that life is going to be difficult. It's going to be a fight. It's going to be a struggle. There's going to be some agony. All right? Fight. There's the recognition this is a struggle. And I'd like to point out to you the remembrance to keep struggling. My dad's in the building this morning. When back in the middle 70s, we lived in Michigan. In fact, we Michiganders, we carry our maps with us where we're from. I'm from here. Back in the 70s, in the wintertime, there were plenty of Saturday afternoons when it wasn't fit to go outside. So during the Saturdays in the wintertime, I remember watching just about every Saturday for a while, ABC's Wide World of Sports. So if I say the phrase, the thrill of victory, do you remember what comes next? The agony of defeat. Do you remember that? When I can hear those words, the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat. I can hear the wah 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 of the music going on behind it. And do you remember the image of agony of defeat? That guy skiing. Miss Debbie, I wasn't sure that you'd even be with. I figured you would have been one of the ladies that would have checked out at this point. But he's coming. It's one of those distant ski jumps where the guy's coming down the ski jump at like 100 miles an hour. He gets to the end of the game and they fly. They're leaning forward on the ski tips. They're leaning forward. It's like they're flying. Do you remember the agony of defeat guy? Comes halfway down the ski ramp, loses his balance, starts to somersault and tumble. It's an awful picture. And they showed it for years, the agony of defeat. That guy's name was Vinko Bogataj. He didn't die. Not only did he was a Slovenian. That tumble, the agony of defeat tumble down that ski ramp took place in 1970, in West Germany. He got a concussion and a broken ankle. But did you know that the very next year, 1971, he returned to ski jumping? Now, as far as I know, he never won a medal, never placed again, but he returned to ski jumping the very next year. When he could no longer ski jump, and not because he was concussed and had a broken ankle, just because he got old, he started coaching ski jumpers. Now, how would you like to have your ski jumper as the agony of defeat guy? How would you like for that to be your coach? But yet in 1991, he coached the world champion ski jumper. Now, it was between Olympics, so he wasn't a gold medalist, but for 1 year, in an off Olympic year, he coached the world champion ski jumper. To supplement his income, he eventually would work as a forklift operator and even as an artist, yes, a painter. Life is a struggle, even for the agony of defeat guy. But in the agony, you don't stop struggling. Yeah, sometimes you gotta pause and heal. Sometimes you gotta pause and let your concussion get better. You gotta let your broken ankle heal up. But in the midst of the agony, you don't stop struggling. If we were to pause here and we were to try to paint the timeline of the Apostle Paul, of his major current events, his major victories in life, we would see plenty of agony. And what you find is he shook it off and he just kept going. He shook it off and he just kept going. I have fought a good fight. Now, no, I'm not asking you to be the Apostle Paul. I'm not asking you to be the Apostle Paul, because our fight is not his fight. But I am suggesting to you this: like he didn't give up, like he fought a good fight, I am telling you, whatever your fight is, keep at it. Jerry, put the frying pan down. Don't hit your wife with the frying pan. Now, that's not the kind of fight I'm talking about. In your Christian life, Jerry does eyebrows like this. Well, maybe, in your Christian life that we're walking here, keep at the struggle. Let me show you number 2 from our passage in verse 7 this morning. Not only does Paul say, I have fought a good fight, he says, I have finished my course. And let me show you here, everyone should finish his course. Everyone should finish his course. You see, there are some things in life that only you can do. Now, everyone can fight a good fight, but only Paul could finish his course. Course, the word for running a race, the specific race that's got corners, a starting line, a finish line, obstacles perhaps. In modern Olympics, sometimes there would be things to jump over. Sometimes there would be corners to run around. In fact, at the marathon, there would be a lengthy course where you've got to follow. You've got to stay on the course, and only you can finish your course. And I want you to notice, as we're thinking about finishing my course, there are no substitutions. I never really played soccer much. Sometimes in high school PE, we'd kick a ball around and pretend that we were playing soccer, but never really played soccer much till I got to college. Started playing college soccer and recognized that when the ball would go deep out of bounds, coaches would start yelling with a hand raised up, sub, sub! Because one of the guys on their team was bent over with their hands on their knees, breathing like this. Coach wanted to get a fresh horse in there to replace that guy. Sub, sub! When I was on the sideline wanting to get in and play, I couldn't wait to hear for the coach to start yelling for a sub, sub, because I thought maybe it might be the chance that I would get substituted in and get a chance to play for somebody else. When I was on the field, when it was my hands on my knees and I was the one that was sucking air like a tired horse, I didn't want to hear the coach yelling sub, because I knew he was going to call me out, substitute somebody in for me. Life is not soccer, though. And in life, there are only things that you can do. Imagine we're at the Olympics. Imagine that our team's sprinter has just hurt himself and is unable to race. If we put our world-class marathon runner in to replace him in the 100-meter sprint, what's his chance of winning that competition?
Not very good.
About that. How about if we were to reverse that? How about if we were to take the fastest man on the planet and we were to replace him on the marathon squad, and instead of having him run as fast as for 100 or 200 meters, we were to put him in for 24.3 miles. How well do you think the world's fastest man would do at that competition? Chances of him winning that are the same. 0. You have to run your course. You have to run your race. There are no substitutions. This person, that person, this person, they can't take the place for you in your particular race. Not only are there no substitutions, there are no deviations. There are no deviations. In the last Winter Olympics back in 2018, there was an Austrian cross-country runner named Teresa Stadlober. She was in second place during her race, and at one point in the race, she turned right where she should have turned left. And instead of getting the silver medal, or maybe even passing the person in front of her winning the gold medal, she came in 9th. You can't deviate from your course. Now, this would have been a good spot for me to pause and write down 15 or 20 ways that Christians deviate from their course. Let me have you use your sanctified imagination for a moment. I'm going to let you add to my message. Are you ready? I'm not going to ask you to shout out loud, but if I were to ask you to shout out loud, what are some of the ways in modern Christianity that Christians get distracted from doing what they ought to be doing? Now, again, I'm not asking you to shout things out. I could have written my own list. I could have turned this in, Jeremiah, Isaiah, I could have turned this into a topical message. 18 ways that modern Christians deviate from their course in life. Could have done that. Would have been relatively easy to do. See, I don't need to do that because you understand just exactly what I'm saying, because there are all kinds of ways that we get distracted and deviate from our course in life. God's got something specific that he wants you to do. But there are so many sparkly things that are all around us that say, ooh, that's pretty. Ooh, that's attractive. Oh, that looks like so much fun. And it's really easy for us to deviate from the path that God wants us to be on. I can't stay over here too long because now I'm out of the picture. All right. So easy for us to do that. I want you to see what Paul wrote here. Paul wrote, I have finished my course. That's a racing picture. Whether he's sprinting or hurdling or long distancing, that part of it doesn't matter. He is staying on his course. Imagine he's out in a marathon. Imagine he's running by a marathon, he gets hot and thirsty, he passes by a soda stand or a hot dog umbrella. Ooh, that'd be kind of fun to stop and grab me a hot dog and a soda. All right, is it gonna help him win his race? No. Is it gonna feel good? Probably. Is he gonna get further going? No, he's not. When we're running our race, we can't deviate from what God's got us to do. Not only are there no substitutions or deviations, there's no quitting. Now look, this is not a salvation issue. I'm not talking about someone trying to lose their salvation. I'm talking about someone getting out of the race of their life. In Rio de Janeiro back in 2016, during a 5,000 meter event, lady Nikki Hamblin from New Zealand fell down during her event. And she fell down right in front of an American named Abby D'Agostino. And she accidentally, it wasn't on purpose, but she accidentally caused her to fall. She tripped her. That was an accident because Hamblin fell down right in front of Abby, and then Abby fell down. All right. According to Abby, when she got up, she was ready to start running again. She looked behind her, and Hamblin was still down. She was actually dazed and hurt. Instead of racing forward, she turned around. She helped Hamblin up, and she said, "Get up, get up. We have to finish this." At that point, Hamblin was hurt. I don't remember how bad she was hurt, but afterward, when the pictures were being taken, Hamblin was actually in a wheelchair. Now, she wasn't wheelchair hurt, but The point was she had to sit down. She was hurt so bad. But here's what she was thinking as Nikki the American was, as Abby the American was saying, get up, we have to finish this. She thought, you're right. This is the Olympics. We have to finish. So 2 minutes behind everybody else. And in a 5,000 meter race, 2 minutes is an eternity. 2 minutes behind everyone else, these two girls who are practically leaning on each other and carrying each other limp across the finish line. No quitting. You have to finish your course. Now, we don't know exactly how long it was. Paul rested here in this Roman prison before he was executed. Church history teaches us that he lost his head. Nero took his head off for the crime of being a Christian. But as far as all the things that God wanted him to do with his life, he had finished them. I have finished my course. How are you doing at running the race that God's got for you? All right? He's fought a good fight. He has finished his course. And now I want you to see number 3. He has kept the faith. Number 3 is everyone must keep the faith. And the emphasis here is on faithful Christianity. Now, it might be easy to read into this that we can lose our salvation. It might be easy to look at the first part of verse 8, I need to keep my faith, that because I can lose my salvation, I better make sure that I keep it. And that doesn't mean that at all, because doctrinally we can't lose our salvation. May I say that one more time into the video camera for those of you who are watching us by way of YouTube and Facebook? From a doctrinal perspective, the Bible teaches us that we cannot lose our salvation. So when Paul says in verse 7, I have kept the faith, that does not mean that he's embraced it so that he didn't throw away his salvation. Rather, there's something else at work here. You see, the faith is a treasure, and the faith is a euphemism for the doctrines of Christianity. It's a euphemism or a turn of speech for the truth of Christianity. I love that. When he's using this figure of speech to describe Christianity, he calls it the faith. He doesn't call it the works. Christianity is not entered into by works. It's not even called the graces, even though it is only by God's grace that we become Christians. We're not the ones responsible for grace. God is. It's called faith. The faith, which is the single human condition that allows God's grace to go to work on our behalf. Christianity is such a treasure. We could, but we won't. We could take our Bibles and we could look back to Matthew 13, which Jesus teaches several parables about the kingdom of heaven. In one of those parables, Jesus calls the kingdom of heaven the pearl of great price. He says, if you could find a pearl of great price, imagine a pearl the size of a baseball or a golf ball, maybe a pearl the size of a bowling ball. All right, just imagine the phenomenal value. He said, what's that worth? We can't even begin to compare what that's worth. He says, if you could find something like that, it would be worth everything that you have. And that's what the kingdom of God is like. He says, the kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hid in a field. I wish I had more time to display this. I don't, but a piece of ground is worth what it's worth. If out where I live there are vacant lot after vacant lot after vacant lot after vacant lot, and if they're all the same acreage size, 0.99 or 1.0 or 1.01 acres, they're all worth exactly the same amount. Lot number 179 is worth the same as lot number 180, worth lot number 180, all right? Let's say that you're out hiking one day and you find on one of those lots buried treasure. That lot now becomes way more valuable because there's treasure on it. That's what Jesus says. Jesus says the kingdom of heaven is like a field where a man finds buried treasure. He says if you could find that kind of a setup, that field is worth whatever it is that you have to get to obtain it because of the treasure that's there. That's what Christianity is like. It's like buried treasure. At the end of the parables, Jesus calls the kingdom of heaven treasure, old and new. So the faith is the treasures of Christianity, and I've called it treasure.